your perseverance. So for those of you I didn't get a chance to say hello to, I'm Rob Wunderling, and I have the real honor and pleasure to serve you as your president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. But I got a significant conundrum of protocol that I have to deal with here. Because well, we got dueling governors. And I was thinking about this because
we're completely supportive of this.
But
we're being very critical of Rob. Rob's trying to get this. It's like a Seinfeld moment.
It's only going to get worse. In 1994, I served in the Schweiker administration and had the great honor to serve with Lieutenant Governor then, Governor Mark Schweiker. I thought, well, he should go first. Then I thought about it. Some of the best work I was able to achieve as a member of the Pennsylvania Senate was with Governor Rendell, particularly the early adoption of the Keystone STARS program, and technology in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. So I was thinking to myself, well, I should introduce Governor Rendell first. Then, you know, Mark used to stand in my shoes, doesn't see it in the chamber, and he taught me everything that was not in the job description. I should introduce Mark first. And wait a minute. Governor Rendell's been great in supporting the chamber. We had a book signing that the governor penned right here in this room. And he declared that I truly was not a wuss. And he wrote that.
We have some buttons right here.
But more importantly, these two leaders, not just in our Commonwealth in this city, but points abroad, are passionately engaged in something that's absolutely critical that we subscribe to as the largest chamber of commerce in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So what I'm going to do is introduce them both, ladies and gentlemen. Governor Mark Schweiker, and Governor Rendell.
Introduction. I've got one, forget where it was, but I'd arrived behind schedule, and in a play on words, I was introduced as the late Mark Schweiker. But I jest. Just a couple of thoughts here, and I've had the unique challenge and pleasure over the last 24 hours being each other's company, talking about Pennsylvania's competitiveness, how we treat 3- and 4-year-olds right relative to early learning opportunities, and just important commitment of access to universal access to high quality early learning opportunities and early childhood education. So we've had some fun. I think we've had our share of air travel. We're happy to be on the ground in Center City, Philadelphia, to talk about these important pursuits. And to give a little perspective, I'm happy that Rob just took a minute and kind of gave some historical context. But so to speak, you know, each of the governors, going back to my colleague Tom Ridge, have advanced what we think are commitments to early childhood education, starting with what was called the TEACH program and some important incentive monies for those involved in early childhood education. Go back to Tom Ridge, and of course, you take a look at those history notes. To some extent, I had the opportunity and privilege to work with some smart people, like Mr. Rogers himself, of Pittsburgh fame, who talked about you know, the good that comes of this kind of effort, and kind of helped establish this fulsome framework for what Pennsylvania must do in order to treat those kids right, to give them opportunities, and really on an economic level for our Commonwealth to be competitive now and well into the future. Because, as Ed has mentioned a couple of occasions already, got a couple of states in the South, you know, pretty conservative places that have, you know, made the commitment to providing universal access, that kind of access to 4-year-olds. So, you know, it's an arms race of sorts as we talk about getting kids ready for the classroom, getting kids ready for the workforce and whatever professional choice they may make. But that framework, so to speak, in part was a basis for the hardworking people of the Rendell administration, so to speak, to run that offense and to provide very significant financial and programmatic and technical commitment, seeing to it, you know, the kids, whether they were, you know, prior to grade 1, whether it was kindergarten in classic sense, or ages 3 and 4 to have that access to early learning. So we've been working with each other, and Governor Corbett has kept the faith to a large extent as well. But more to be done, and that's why we're here today. So, and I'm looking at, I got a smile at Barb Severino, who's of the chamber. Barb, you probably can give the commercial about what we experienced when we kicked off the Read to Me program. Very proud of that, which Ed, did I not, flying back, talk about the virtue of it? And just as yeah, and an important aside is, if, I mentioned this to Donna Cooper too, I think could be viewed as an important architect of this effort, is that, when you bring the business community in, it says something about this growing consensus that pushes forward the whole pre-K for PA effort. It is, business and labor. It is Republican and Democrat. It is older and younger. So in that regard, it's a diverse coalition that sees that important dynamic human development connection between what we offer to 3- and 4-year-olds and what they might do in the 3rd and 4th grade, or what they might do in later grades, what they might do later in work life. But involving the business community is one of our precepts. And if you take a look at the roster, that's growing every day. So you are in good company. And so obviously, with Ed and I giving up our political ideologies, we are together on this as well. And that's an important dynamic. But for Read to Me, we had a really good experience there. And, when these business executives, and we encourage the folks that are involved in this, you get them into the classroom. And they say, hey, bring a check too. And read to the kids. Be animated that they want to go back a year later. And they want to go back year after year after year because it's exciting. It feels rewarding. And, 3 to 4-year-olds look at you, and they're so grateful that they've got the attention. And when you hand them a book, am I right? Yeah. It's like, here's my gift. Mm-hmm. So this is not about gifts. We're talking about an important institutional commitment for the Commonwealth, for all 67 counties. And it involves, in our mind, adopting a mentality of building blocks. What we do in those precious 3rd and 4th year of life, and what goes on later in the classroom builds on that. In junior high, it builds on that. In high school, it builds on that. In fact, the Erie superintendent today made quite clear that you do this well at those ages, you can push down your financial outlay for remedial education in elementary school. So this is not just about, not just about human development in intellectual and academic sense, even though that's profoundly important to us. It's also a way to manage budgets and lower costs and that kind of thing later in years. And secondly, and then I'm going to introduce my successor and friend and colleague, Ed Rendell, is these are competitive times. And there is a connection between the caliber of your workforce, and Joe, you know this because you've got United Way's every minute efforts across a big region here in Philadelphia. And the reality is, when you're recruiting companies to think about doing business here, and Steve, I know you do live it as well, they're interested to know about the caliber of your education platform. They want to know about the caliber of your guidance counselors. Moms and dads do want to know about the caliber of educator involved in early learning and early childhood education. It's a bonus. It's attractive. I mean, at this point, Georgia and Oklahoma, have made that kind of commitment. Well, I don't know about you. I'm a born and bred Pennsylvanian. I'm not going to cede anything to those 2 states relative to the companies we like to have here with jobs, or the kind of education that they might offer in the public school systems or in non-public efforts as well. So in that regard, our message is not just about the academic realm. It's that plus. We do this right. See this as an important measure of distinguishing Pennsylvania, economic competitiveness. So we think we can draw very in a technically sound fashion the causality between what we do at those young ages and what goes on later in school or later in the workforce or later in professional life. And finally, feel strongly about this. It's okay to feel strongly about this. I mean, the reality is, in Harrisburg, they've got their hands full, some budget decisions to make, and we're merely saying, don't solve the problem tonight, maybe tomorrow. Or this month. We know it doesn't happen. It would be unrealistic to think that, or to make that ask. We know that. But over the next couple of years, let's use the down payment mentality and in a financial and budgetary sense, begin to pursue and act on those commitments. So this is pretty much what I managed to offer in the last 10 minutes is what brings us here today. And I'm encouraged that you take the time to be here and are supportive as well. So with that, let me yield the floor to Governor Rendell.
Let me begin by saying I thank the Chamber for doing this. This is only going to get done in part this effort if the business community of the entire Commonwealth gets behind it. And Rob has been a leader in that, and the Chamber has put its prestige behind this effort. And we thank you, Rob, and thank the members of the Chamber for doing so. Let me also say one of the problems with our society is there's no press here. Now, you can subscribe no press here to a number of different things. But the big problem is they're more interested in seeing protesters protesting Governor Corbett, Governor Christie. And they've covered the story of protesters about Governor Corbett's education policy about 72 times. And they're covering it for a 73rd time instead of being here to hear about what can be done to change society. And it's a crime. It is a crime. But thank you all for coming out. And Mark, of course, as he usually does, made some very relevant points. I just want to take you back to show you where we are today. Mark gave you a glimpse, but when I was running for governor, I heard that the Schweiker administration, because of Mark's leadership, had impaneled a commission to report back to the governor and the legislature on early childhood education. At that time, Pennsylvania was one of only 9 states that didn't give one dime to help of state funds to help pre-K education. The only governmental money that came in was the Head Start money, and that was federal money. The commission was excellent. It was chaired by Marilyn Ware-Lewis, and it came up with a terrific report, which it handed to Governor Schweiker and the legislature essentially in the last 2 months of Governor Schweiker's term, and we couldn't do anything with it other than meet with me as Governor-elect. Mark and I met, we went over the report, and we decided we were going to institute the report very quickly. And we did with programs like putting state money into Head Start for the first time. That expanded the number of kids we could get in Head Start. Expanding the TEACH program and Keystone Stars. Developing an Office of Child Care Development and Learning, which for the first time had the same person as Deputy Secretary of the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services, because child care is all about, early childhood education is all about child care on the one hand, education on the other, and they're intertwined. And then we developed a program called Pre-K Counts. And we put our money where our mouth is. And in fact, Pre-K Counts became so successful that in the summer of '09, President Obama, addressing the NAACP in New Orleans, cited the Pre-K Counts program as the best in the nation and said other states should emulate Pennsylvania. So we were at the top of the heap back then. And we now have fallen, according to an independent nonprofit that monitors this, the 41 states that contribute to their pre-K system, we're now 30th out of 41. Now, that's not because Governor Corbett cut funding, he didn't. This is one area where he held level. But you hold something level for 4 or 5 years, and you're essentially falling behind because of inflation. And other states, Mark said Oklahoma and Georgia, other states have passed us by. They've made a significant commitment. And I remember when we first proposed this, in my first budget, I proposed spending $500 million on early childhood education. That wasn't just pre-K. It was pre-K, it was full-day kindergarten, it was smaller class sizes, K through 3, it was after-school tutoring. But that year, I don't know if any of you recall, we didn't have an education budget until December 21st. And we were supposed to have a budget on July 1st. We battled with the legislature because they didn't want to raise taxes more than they had to anyway for the budget deficit. And I said, if we're going to raise taxes, let's raise it and get something done. Let's not just plug a hole in the deficit. And we compromised and we put $300 million additional dollars into the budget. Since that day, 100,000 young people have gotten pre-kindergarten high-quality educational experience, 100,000. In Erie this morning, they've done a great job in Erie. For a small county, they've raised a lot of money locally. The Erie Foundation weighed in a way that it's just spectacular. And of the 6,900 kids in Erie that are qualified for pre-K and as 4-year-olds, 2,000 are in, 4,900 aren't. So almost 3 out of every 4 aren't, despite the fact that that community has done everything they could. It's a question of scale. And scale, the proper scale, can only come from a commitment by the legislature and the government. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're going to task all of you, Rob, and everyone with a mission. And I'll never forget, when I introduced my first budget, my first year as governor, the one I talked about, we went on as governors often do, we went on a statewide tour of all the media markets to promote the budget. And the last stop was here in the Philadelphia region. We went to Norristown High School. And I was introduced that day by the student council president, who said in his introduction, Governor, can you explain to us why in Montgomery County, one of the richest counties in America, some children are handed Palm Pilots when the school year begins, and others weren't even given books? And I knew he wasn't attacking me as governor. I know he was governor for 5 weeks. But I felt ashamed, not as governor, but as an adult Pennsylvanian who had the resources to send his son to Montessori school as a 3-year-old and Montessori school as a 4-year-old. To see my son not only read exceptionally well before he got to kindergarten, but good socialization skills, and even in Montessori school they taught him Spanish. Jesse could not have survived in the barrio, but he knew some Spanish words. It was really remarkable the level of education he had before he entered kindergarten. And you knew that that was going to lead to success academically. Jesse's been everywhere he's gone. He's been a cum laude or magna cum laude student. I wanted that same experience for every child in Pennsylvania. Well, we're not there yet. We've made progress thanks to the Governor Schweiker's commission, thanks to the work of Harry Dichter, and who's head of that, which is the Joint Deputy Secretary, Donna and Vicki Phillips, and a number of people. Nan Castellano is here with us today. We made great strides, but we need to do even more. And the great news is there's an opportunity. Now, I agree with the people who say that spending money doesn't guarantee a good education. But I also know that not spending enough money guarantees you won't get a good education. And the things we're talking about, pre-K, full-day kindergarten, smaller class sizes, after-school tutoring, every one of them requires money. Every one of them requires money. So this is an election year for the governor and for the legislature. We want to raise pre-K, the pre-K issue, pre-K Pennsylvania, to the #1 issue in the election campaign. And that's hard to do. Although, interestingly, polls show that 67% of Pennsylvanians favor expanded pre-K for children, which is pretty remarkable. It's hard these days to get 67% of Pennsylvanians to agree to today's budget. We live in such a contentious world. 67% agree that this is something that should be at the top of our radar screen. We want to pound the governor's candidates, and we want to pound legislative candidates to get a commitment from them that this will be an issue that they'll strive. Our goal is in 2018 to have complete access to quality pre-K education for 4-year-olds, Donna, or 3-year-olds too. Both.
3 and
4-year-olds by 2018. And we believe that's doable. It looks like the legislature, can't be sure, as Mark and I know, nothing is ever certain in the House, but it looks like they're going to finally pass a severance tax on the shale gas that's taken from underground in Pennsylvania. We're the only state that has significant shale that doesn't have a severance tax. Severance tax will produce somewhere between $500, $700, $800 million a year. And the state is facing $1 billion plus deficit. The question is, if they pass that shale tax, will the money just be funneled into the general fund with no future earmark, or will we earmark it for education and particularly for early childhood? We can't. We can. We should. If all that money goes to is wiping out a deficit, it doesn't do one thing for Pennsylvania's future. It doesn't invest one dime in the future. So I'm going to give you all two charges. One is electorally to keep the pressure on the candidates, and not just Governor Corbett and Mr. Wolf, but on legislative candidates. We have enough legislators in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs. If they united on this issue, we would get significant change. Suburban Republicans, suburban Democrats, Philadelphia Democrats. We have enough legislators that if we made sure that each and every one of them knew that we cared, that we were going to be single issue voters going forward on this, I think we would make a difference. But secondly, I'm hopeful, and we'll talk to Rob about this later, that the business community here can send letters to the governor and our legislative delegation saying that if you pass a new form of revenue, like a severance tax, that some at least of that should be earmarked to this cause. And even if they say we have to spend some money on reducing the deficit, or even if they were to say we have to spend all of the money this year on reducing the deficit, have it earmarked in future years for pre-K and full day and things like that. We have gone back in some areas. If you know the success of full day kindergarten, we almost up at 75% when I left as governor, now way down 35 or 40%. We need to go back up again. We need to go back up again. We can do these things. And Governor Corbett has spoken about the value of the accountability block grant. So we've got to put this pressure on. We've got to write these letters and communicate, and we've got to make this a #1 issue. Now, thank you for listening, and thank you for hearing that message. It's a shame that the media, again, more interested in protests, wasn't here to hear that message. In Erie, every TV station showed up, every radio station showed up, and the Erie Times showed up. So it is a shame, but nonetheless, we've got to keep pushing. And I'm now giving the pleasure of introducing Joe Michaels. You know that Joe has done a terrific job leading the United Way, following in the footsteps of a great leader, Albert Martinez. And Joe,
all of you for being here today and for everything you do for the children of Pennsylvania and for children all across the region. Thank you very much to both of you governors. You're very sincere and impassioned plea. It is going to make a difference. We do have momentum. We may never be single issue voters, but we're going to act like we are. We are going to push universally. You have so many people across this region, across this Commonwealth, who really are united in this fight for kids. And I, on a very personal level, being the parent of a soon-to-be 8- and 9-year-old, this is incredibly meaningful to me on a very personal level. When Governor Rendell talked about Jesse and talking about seeing that very firsthand, as a parent, I see this. I feel it very firsthand, almost on a daily basis. And it's become an incredibly important part of all of our lives. We've all been talking about this. We talk about education a lot, right? But we don't really talk about the entire expanse of education. This really is a cradle to career journey. We have to think about it like this. You heard Governor Schweiker talk about the fact that this isn't just about education as an end unto itself. This is something that we do as a moral imperative, but we also need to consider its economic imperative as well. This is a big part of the way in which this community and our society is truly going to become competitive in a 21st century workforce for the next generation to come. No child's destiny should be determined by the time he or she is 5 years old. We have to absolutely say to every child that they have the right to start on a level playing field. And that's what this conversation is about. You also heard conversations about the fact that this really does have a huge return on investment. We know that children who receive a high quality early education are more likely to read at grade level at 3rd grade, successfully make the transition from middle school to high school, graduate from high school, attend college, own a home, and keep a regular job. But they're also less likely to require special education, public assistance, or to become incarcerated. If that's not a sales pitch enough for you, Just look around, look at your own families, look at your own children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, the children in your family, and compare them to the children who don't have the exposure, to people who are talking to them every day, to the people who are picking up a book, like in the Read to Me program. You've got kids entering kindergarten, some who can read and write and some who don't know which way to hold a book. That disparity should never exist. We should never allow it to exist. We know that there are some kids, you said, some kids, we do have the access of high quality early education, but only 1 in 6 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Those other 5 kids are our kids too. And we need to make sure every one of them has the same opportunity. And philanthropy can only do so much. And that's really what the thrust of this conversation is all about. We need to be able to make sure we charge this Commonwealth to make sure that every child is our child. And so on behalf of the team at United Way, we want to thank you, thank all the phenomenal partners in this. Thank you to Rob for hosting us today. Thank you to the entire community that I know has embraced this, as well as the business community that I know we are going to engage with in an increasingly meaningful way. In a time when there are far too many people, in my opinion, pointing fingers, this is an issue around which we can actually lock arms. And I appreciate the fact that so many of you are willing to do that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen.
My job is really to do the final thank yous, and thanks to both Governor Schweiker and Governor Rendell for their support. Thanks to Rob and the Chamber for hosting. And also thank you to the Southeastern partners, the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia, of which I'm the Executive Director. The Economy League got into this for those competitiveness reasons and for the impact of the investment that we can make. And when we went out and asked 1,500 top issues that this region needs to be excelling on whenever we get to the year 2026, and this is the long-term view. They said pre-K is the issue. It's one of those issues. Every child needs to be ready to succeed whenever they start school. But our other partners, the VACI, the Delaware Valley Association for the Education of Young Children, Donna Cooper and PCCY, Public Citizens for Children and Youth, and obviously the United Way. And United Way is all across the state who have supported this. We have 6 other partners across the state. This is a statewide campaign. As Governor Rendell mentioned, 67% of the public support this from a polling perspective. 58% said they would even raise their taxes to support pre-K. Now that's not something we can definitely get everybody to agree on. But thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. A couple things. There are cards out on the table. Donna, why don't you just give it to me and I'll show you. Thanks. It's a nice kind of cool card. It has pre-K math on it. One of the things that the Economy League's job on is doing the numbers, and we're always in the numbers job. And one of the things we have done is commission an economic impact report. And as the governor's mentioned, you do spend money to do this, and whenever you spend that money, jobs do get created. Jobs in pre-K centers, but also jobs in those companies that they buy supplies from, jobs in those companies that they contract with, and the folks that are supported in their local community. This card has that little bit of pre-K math. All PA children plus access to pre-K equals 28,000 new jobs and 1.8 billion in local sales across the Commonwealth. Good economic news. Add on to that the long-term benefits that both governors mentioned. This is an investment that pays off for the long term. The best part about this card, though, is you grab it, and you turn it over, and you sign on to be a supporter of the campaign. John Herman and his team and the team of outreach folks that both the VACI and PCCY have will be in touch with you to talk to you about how you can be a supporter of this campaign, and in particular from the business community, how we can multiply your support across the business community. I'm really excited to see other chambers here, Bernie Dagenet from the Mainline Chamber here. Thanks again, Bernie, for your support and your support of our world-class effort. But thanks to all of you for joining us. Grab a card, grab some more information, and thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
We're going to take a few questions from Steve. The governors, I think, have to go. They're on a tight schedule, but Jill and Steve might answer a few questions if there are any on today.
Can we do a quick picture? That's my question.
Right there.
Good job.
All right.
Yeah.
Get up there. Make sure we get a picture.
Thank you.
This is better than
It's social media.
Instagram, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, social media. It's nice meeting you.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right.
I can get in there.
All right, get that.
I